Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Kamma Mem Tes. We're going to start Mem Ches on the base, 4 lines from the bottom. Today's Daf Yomi should be for a Shmira, for a Atzola, for Am Yisrael, for the Shvuyim, for the Chayalim during this very difficult time. Says the Mishnah, Shor Shayim Eskavin L'Chavero. Let's say there was an ox that was intending to strike another ox, Vahika esa isha, but this ox just struck instead a woman, V'yatzu yoadeha, and the fetus was miscarried, Tatar mitzvei v'ados. Then we're going to say under those circumstances, the ox is exempt from paying, the owner of the ox is exempt from paying the value of the fetus. Now, even though in general the Torah tells us that if a person strikes a woman, the man has to pay the value of the fetus. That's only a person. But if an ox strikes another ox who is intending to strike another ox and it struck a person and the fetus was miscarried, then he's exempt from paying the value of the fetus. But an Adam Shayim Miskavim L'Chavero, if a person was intending to strike his friend, V'hika es Aisha, and he strikes the woman, V'yatzi Yadeh, and the baby is miscarried, Mishalim is made v'adus. The person has to pay the penalty, the value of the fetus. Well, how do we calculate the value of the fetus? Ketzah Mishalim made v'adus. How do we calculate such an amount? Shaman es Aisha. We look at the woman, Kama hi yafa achal yalda. We look at the woman and we determine how much is she valued at on the market, the valuation of this woman. Misha Yolda once Yolda, how much is she valued at before she gave birth, and now how much is she valued at after she gave birth? Presumably she's worth more when she's going to produce a second person. Says Rabbi Shimon, and so therefore we look at the depreciation. Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, no. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, Im kain misha isha yoledes misha bechas. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, well, if that would be the case, when a woman actually gives birth, we'll see what this statement means in the Gemara. The Gemara is going to explain it, but he says a woman actually, presumably, her value goes down after she gives birth, because, and the reason is, that a woman's value actually goes up after she gives birth. We'll see how the Mishnah explains it. So therefore, Shaman es avodos kama and yafin. So rather, Shimon Gamliel says, we look at the value of the fetus, which is just higher. Just what is the value of the fetus? And we give that amount to the husband. And if there's no husband there, no yorshav. Then you just give it to his heirs. Meaning this is money that goes to the husband and not to the woman. If there's no husband, it goes to his heirs. Well, let's say the woman was married to a man and they died. And so now she's left by herself and she has no relatives because she was a convert. Then the Mishnah says, Potter, the person doesn't pay the money because there's nobody to pay it to, because she doesn't collect the money. So verse that in the Torah that only the money goes to the husband. So the Gemara first understands, let's analyze the phrase, that what's the reason why the ox is, that what's the reason that the ox is exempt from payment for the value of the fetus? Because it intended to strike another ox. That's the inference from the language of the Mishnah. But if he intended to strike the woman, then indeed the owner of the ox will pay the value of the fetus. Is this in fact the refutation of Ravada Baraba, the Amar Ravada Baraba, Shvarshin Iskavnu Isha Ketura Midmei V'adus? That Ravada Baraba taught that if there were oxen that were intending to strike a woman, we're going to say they're exempt from paying the value of the fetus. Is this contradicting the teaching of our Mishnah? So Amar Ravada Baraba, no, who adin dafil niskavnu Isha Nami Ketura Midmei V'adus. And Rabbi Barabba says, according to our Mishnah, we would also say, even if the ox was intending to strike another woman, as opposed to just an ox, it would also say the owner of the ox is exempt from paying for the value of the fetus. So why does our Mishnah say specifically an ox and was intending to strike another ox? V'hadik Tani Shorshem Miskaben Chavero is Aidi the Kabbalah Misnei Seifa because the Mishnah wants to list the second clause. Adam Shayim Miskaben Chavero, that if a person was intending to strike his friend and instead struck the woman, he pays with the value of the fetus. The Achik Siv Kra, because that's how the verse writes it. So therefore, for that reason, Katani Reisha Nami Shor Shayim Miskaben Chavero. So therefore, the first clause says as well, the ox that was intending to strike his friend. Amar Papa, Shor Shenyagachas Hashifcha. Rav Papa says, let's say there's an ox that gores this shifcha, v'yatzu yoladea, and under those circumstances, the fetus, the ox gores this shifcha, and the fetus comes out. Misham dmei v'adus. So Rav Papa says, even if he intended to gore a shifcha, you pay the value of the fetus. You pay the value of the fetus, meaning to say that normally an ox it doesn't pay the value of the fetus, but in this case, since it gores a shifcha, the slave woman, you do pay the value of the fetus. Why? My time. Because since it's a slave, the Gemara is comparing that the valuation to the way they're categorizing it like we categorize a pregnant donkey. Meaning to say, the Talmud is saying that since the verse says it's very difficult to speak like this, but it's just talking in legal terms, but it's not on a theological level. But the Talmud says that because this slave woman, this Canaanite, is compared to a donkey, so because it says stay here with the donkey, the nation that's similar to the donkey. So therefore, for this reason, we're going to view the ox as it's not like it gored a woman who was pregnant, but it's like the ox gored a pregnant animal, and so therefore, of course, you're paying for everything, that all the damage that you did. Gemara says, how do we determine the value of the fetus? So the Gemara says, but Tmei Vados, why does it just say the value of the fetus? What about Shevach Vados Mitbayaleng? But we should also determine the increase in the woman's body that came as a result of being pregnant, meaning to say that she looked stronger and bigger and healthier, and so now that without that, she's diminished. So the Gemara says, right, how do we determine not only the value of the fetus, but also the increase in valuation that the fetus brings to the woman? So Shamana Saisha Kami Yafa Yalda Vakami Yafa Mishayalda. We look at the woman, how much is she worth before she gave birth, and now how much less is she worth now that she gave birth? Amar Rabbi Shimon Gamliel argues, he says, but if that's the case, actually, but the woman gives birth, she's actually increased. So what's Rabbi Shimon Gamliel saying? Maika Amar Rabba Hachan Kamar. This is what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying. Does a woman actually worth more before she gives birth than after she gives birth? A woman's actually worth more after she gives birth. And the reason is, before she gives birth, commentaries explain, because there's the concern that maybe she's going to die in childbirth. And so therefore, the valuation is less than after she gives birth once that concern has passed. So therefore, the Ela Shamanas Avlados, but rather what we do is we evaluate the vlados, we evaluate the fetuses, and we give them to the husband. We evaluate the value of the fetus separately. That's what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying, which is obviously to the advantage of the husband, because the fetus is going to be at a higher valuation if we look at it separately. And Tanya Nami Yachi, we have a price that supports this reading that of Rabbah. Tanya Nami Yachi, v'chiisha meshavechas kodem shetela yoser me'la'achar sheteled, v'hoisha meshavechas ha'achar shetela yoser me'kodem sheteled. So that's the explanation of Rabbah that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying. Excuse me. We just look, since a woman's valuation goes up after she gives birth, and we can't have it that the mazik is going to actually make money because he says, I'm making you money, but rather we say, you look at the fetus separately, and that's what we do. But Rabbah says, no, hachi katani, this is what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is saying. Do you think that the woman's valuation, that it's just the fetus that goes up in value, but she herself shouldn't get any of the increase of as a result of the fetus, but rather she herself has increased in value? So she should also get some of the increase which comes as a result of the expanse of her body and the expanse of her physique, which we discussed. So we look at the value of the fetus itself, that we give to the husband. But the increase in her body as a result of the fetus, i.e., like her physique expands, that that we split between the husband and the woman. That's what Rava is saying. And Tanya Nami Hachindi, we have a brisa that says this approach. But rather, what we do is we calculate the damages on its own. The pain on its own, both those go to the woman. So we do the fetus, that goes to the husband. And the increase in her body as a result of the fetus, that we split. So according to these approaches, Kasha the Rebbe Shimon Gamliel. So we have two different approaches to Rebbe Shimon Gamliel, but Rebbe Shimon Gamliel seems to be contradictory then. In the first case, Rebbe Shimon Gamliel says we look at the fetus separately, and that, and in the second case, we're saying that we look at her after she gave birth, and we pay the value of the fetus to the husband, to the value of her with the fetus to the husband, and she splits the Shevach Vados. So the Gemara says, well, kasha, one is by a case where she's given birth before, and one is where she has never given birth before. Where she's given birth before, then if it's her first time she's giving birth, then before she gives birth, where her valuation is lower because it's more of a danger because we don't know how she's going to do during childbirth. But once she's given birth before, then her valuation is higher before she gives birth than after she gives birth. So that's what the Gemara's point is. So then the Gemara says, the point to Rabbanan who say that not only does the husband get the Dmei Vados, the value of the fetus itself, but also the increase in the woman's body, which came as a result of the fetus, the Shevach Vados. My time, and what's the reasoning? From the fact the pasuk says, and her fetus came out, I know she's pregnant. Why does the pasuk have to say, hara? Why does it say in the pasuk isha hara v'yatsu yoadeha? Why does it have to say the pasuk hara? Well, marlacha shevach hirayon labal to tell us that the increase in the pregnancy goes to the husband. Whereas Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says, "Hi harish my darishbei." What does Rabbi Shimon Gamliel do with this word hara? He says, "Mibalek detanya Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov Omer." It's the follow Rabbi Elazar ben Yaakov's shita who says that the man who hits her is only responsible when he strikes her, Rahmana Litzlan, opposite the place where she was pregnant. And Amar Papa, Lo Tema Kineged Beis Harayon Mamish, don't say literally opposite the place where she was pregnant. Elakol Echad Desalek by Shichmo Avad, anytime where if he would strike her in a place, it would cause swelling in the fetus. But it excludes the hand and the foot where there would be no swelling in the fetus as a result. But if she was a freed woman or a Canaanite slave who was freed, or she was a convert, then the man doesn't pay anything because she has no husband to give it to, and also he doesn't pay her. So Amarabba lo shanu el shachavo bar. When do we say that he doesn't pay her? When, says Rabbah, when the man struck her while her husband, who was the ger, who was the convert, was still alive, umeis hager, and then the convert died. Even the kavol babachaya ger, zachu beger, because since the husband was alive, the ger, the convert, her husband, acquired the money. Vikimin the meis hager, and then once the convert dies, zachu behumin hager, the mazik immediately acquired the money because he had not yet given it to the convert. But let's say he struck her after her husband died, and so she's all alone. Then she is going to basically acquire the money, as Rashi says, because the fetus is the assets of her husband, and when the convert dies and she's still pregnant, she acquired the fetus before any person, and so therefore we follow. He would have to pay her. The man would have to pay her. Zachya. So that's what we have to say. That if he struck her after her husband died, then we're going to say Zachya la'i bigavayu and he would have to pay. The man would have to pay her the money. So when he hears this approach, Amar Rav Chisda Mari Dichi. So Rav Chisda says the one who said this, Mari Dichi Atu Vados Tzrarininu. You think that this fetus that we're saying that she acquired is like bundles of money, v'zachyabu, and therefore she was able to acquire it once her husband dies? That's not the way it works. And so Rav Chisda says, "El isol aval zachale rachmana." If the husband was alive, the Torah says the husband gets the fetus, and so therefore he's acquired it, and the man who strikes the husband has to pay the husband, and if the husband dies, he's acquired it. So isol aval zachale rachmana, isol aval. Oh, but if there's no husband, then the guy doesn't pay because there's nobody to make a claim against the person who struck him. The Gemara challenges this. Meisvei, the Gemara says, the Gemara is going to challenge. The Gemara is going to challenge this idea. Says the Gemara, Meisvei, Ikar ha'isha v'yotzi yodav, v'nose nezek v'tzaro isha, v'dmei vodas labal. Strikes the woman, and the fetus comes out. He gives the pain and the damages to the woman, and the value of the fetus goes to the husband. Ein ha'bal knows only Yorshim. If there's no husband, it goes to the heirs. Ein ha'isha, if there's no woman, knows only Yorsheh. You give it to her heirs. Isa shivcha v'nishtachar. She was a freed woman, and she was a slave, and she was freed. O giores zacha. She acquires it, and so the man acquires it. He acquires that which he has, and so therefore, even if the assumption is, even if he struck the fetus after the death of the convert, the ger, her husband, he's still going to get the money. So therefore, this is going to be a question on Rava. So the Gemara says, why? Why do you assume that this case of the price is better than our Mishnah, where we established it was Shachavo Bava Kamma ger, where he struck her during the lifetime of her husband, who made Sager, and then the convert died, then her husband died. That's what the case of this price is. That's the scenario of this price. Where we buy the same, or alternatively, what we're referring to is where he struck her after her husband died, but don't read it as Zacha, as the husband acquires, as the Mazik acquires it, but read it, understand it as Zachta. It's not, we're not amending the text, that's what it says, but we're rather saying, Zacha, the one who has the rights to it is who's acquiring it, i.e. the Mazik. Gemara says on top of Mem Tesam Beis, Lema Ketanai. Let's say this dispute between Rava and Rav Chisda, again, in a case where the Mazik struck this woman who was the Giores, he strikes her after her husband has died. Does he have to pay her or not? According to Rava, he does. According to Rav Chisda, he doesn't. Let's say it's a dispute amongst the Tanaim. Because we say Bas Yisrael Shenitzeis Lager. Let's say there's a Jewish woman who marries a convert, and it's Abram Menu, and then Bas Yisrael Shenitzeis Lager. Let's say she was a Jewish girl who marries a convert. When it's Abram Menu, she became pregnant. The Chaval Bava Kamma, and then the Mazik strikes her while her husband's alive. No saint may vodas Lager. Then he has to give the money to the ger. But if he struck her after her husband died, Tani Chada Chayev, one says he has to pay her, that would be like Rava, but Tani Chada Pater, and the other one says he's exempt, that would be like Rav Chisda. My lav to nine. Are we going to say that it's a machukas tanaim? So Gemara says Rabba Vadai Tanai. According to Rabba, we're going to say it's certainly machukas tanaim, that one says he has to pay her in this case, and one says he doesn't. But Rav Chisda, Milema Tanai. Would we say that it's a malchokas of Tanaim also according to Rav Chisda? Kasha Harabanan Harab Shimon Gamliel. He says no. One is the position of the Rabbanan, and one is the position of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Meaning to say, Rav Chisda says the brisa that says that he's exempt, that follows the Rabbanan who say that the Torah says that only the husband gets the shevach vados, whereas the brisa says that he's chayiv, that follows the position of Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that they split the shevach brothers, the increase in her physique as a result of the pregnancy. Gemara says, Ira Shimon Gamliel. Well, if you're saying it's Rashbag that says that she gets to split the shevach vados, then why does the price specifically make a distinction? Misa. Why does it say specifically in the case after her husband died? Even if he struck her while her husband was alive, she should still get her share of the shevach vados. The Gemara explains, yeah, because Michayim, if he struck her while her husband was alive, according to Shimon Gamliel, Isla Palga, then she would get half of the Shevach Vados. But La'achar Misa, but if he struck her after her husband died, Kue, she would get all of the Shevach Vados. Or Ibai same, or alternatively, Hava Hara Shimon Gamliel. So, or you could say that both positions follow Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, who says that she splits the Shevach Vados, but Kama Shevach Vados, Kama Dmei Vados. Yeah, he has to pay her. When it says Chayiv, it means he has to pay her the Shevach Vados, but when he says that he's exempt from paying, that's talking about a case of Dmei Vados, where she doesn't pay the Dmei Vados. Excuse me, when he says that he has to, it says that when it says that he's Chayiv, that's to pay the Shevach Vados, where the husband died. But when he says he's exempt, Rav Chisda would say that is the case of the Dmei Vados, which she doesn't pay under those circumstances. So the Gemara says, well, Amri Mishevach Vados Lishman Dmei Vados. Why don't we say from the fact that he has to pay all of the money of the Shevach Vados if the husband died, why wouldn't we learn from here that he would also pay her the Dmei Vados? Umi the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, and from the fact that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that he gets all of the Shevach Vados in those circumstances, Umi the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Lishma Rabbanan, and from Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, why don't we learn from here that the Rabbanan who say that even though the Rabbanan say that if he struck her while the husband's alive, the Shevach Vados only goes to the husband, but when he struck her after the death of her husband, she should at least get half of it, just like Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says that she gets all of it. So we should at least say that. Well, let's see how the Gemara says. This is how Rashi says, I mean, the Rabbi Shimon Gamliel Dashmin the Zachta Bechalko Nishman Nami or Rabbanan the Zachta Bekulam. So from the fact that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel says she would get all of it after of the Shevach Vados after the husband died, we should see also for the Rabbanan she should get all of it, because the Rabbanan maybe only argue while her husband's still alive, but after he dies, maybe there wouldn't be any argument. Gemara says no. Amri lo. Shevach Vados the Sheikha Yada Begavayo Zachyu Bekulu. The Shevach Vados, she has a stake in it, so therefore she's going to get all of it after her husband dies. The Dmei Vados, just the value of the fetus, though Sheikha Yada Begavayo, she has no sheikhos to it at all. Or Zachyu Bekulu, she doesn't get any of it at all. The Baimine Rav Yeba Saba. So now the Gemara is going to discuss, since we raised the concept of a ger and the fact that the convert, after he dies, he doesn't have any heirs if he doesn't have any children or a spouse. So because the convert is like a katan shenolad, I mean it's like a newborn person. And we raised a couple of other ones with respect to a convert. Somebody who grabs a hold of a contract of a convert, meaning to say that there is a Jew who had real estate and he borrowed money from the convert and he gave a contract. He put his real estate down as a deposit, as a pledge with the convert, but he didn't give him the land. He didn't give him the actual physical land to hold as the pledge. He gave him the contract. And now after this convert dies, somebody comes along and grabs a hold of this contract of the convert. Do we say, clearly he hasn't grabbed the land? So what do we say here? So do we say man the machzik b'shtar, that the one who grabs a hold of the contract, his whole intent was to grab a hold of the land. So therefore, since he can't really seize the land by just grabbing this contract, shtar namilokan, he didn't actually acquire these pieces of paper either, the parchment. Because his intent was to acquire the land and not the contract. So therefore, he also doesn't acquire the contract. Or do we say no? His intent was also to acquire the contract, and so therefore, since his intent was also to acquire the contract, he's going to use this contract, and so therefore he acquired the actual pieces of paper, even though he doesn't acquire the land. So the Gemara says, Amar way. So Rav Nachman responds. Rav Nachman responds in using an expression. He says to him, Ani Mori, he says, my master, answer me. How could you say that he intends to just acquire the paper? What's he going to use with this piece of paper? Is he going to use it as like a bottle cap to put it over his jug? Is that what he's going to use it for? So the Gemara says, Amalei. The Gemara responds, yeah, that's exactly what he's going to use it for. It says Rabbi Yeba Saba, Latsur v'Latsur. Yeah, that's he's going to use it for. So that was the question, and it's kind of left unanswered. Amaraba Mashkono Shal Yisrael Biad Geber. Now we look at it from the other way. Let's say a Jew has a pledge in the hands of the convert. Umeisager, and then the convert dies. Uba Yisrael Acher, and another Jew comes. So let's say he put his diamonds with the convert, and then as a pledge, and then the convert dies. Uba Yisrael Acher ve'efsiko, and so another Jew comes along and grabs these diamonds. Motzino somiyado. We take the diamonds away from the Jew who sees them and give them back to the person who put them as a pledge. What's the reasoning? Kivan the miss my time. Kivan the misleger pakole shipudo. So since the convert died, he lost his lien on the property, and so therefore we're going to say that it goes back to the Jew. But let's say we have a mashkono shalger b'yad Yisrael. Let's say the convert puts his pledge into the hands of the Jew. The convert gives his diamonds to the Jew, who meisager, and now the convert dies. Uba Yisrael achar, a different Jew comes along, and he acquires these diamonds. He grabs hold of these diamonds. So the first Jew who had lent the convert money, and that's why he got these diamonds as a pledge, he retains the value of his loan vis-a-vis those diamonds, but the rest of the diamonds, the rest of the value, the third party Jew who sees them, he gets the value of the diamonds beyond the original loan. Why does the Jew who lent them, why don't we say that he automatically acquired these diamonds? Since the diamonds were in his possession, his courier should have acquired them. Even though he doesn't have intent to acquire them, a person's courier acquires something even without an intent. Gemara says, no. No, the Gemara says, no, here what we're talking about is he's not there. Wherever, if he was in town, if he was there, if he wanted to, he could acquire it, then we'd say your courtyard acquires it. But wherever he's not there, where if he wanted to acquire it, he wouldn't have been able to. His courtyard also doesn't acquire it. And the halacha is that in a circumstance where Beleise Bechatzero, in a case where where the pledge is not in the courtyard of the lender when he dies, the lokana, and he has not acquired it. But if it was in his courtyard, then we're going to say he's acquired everything, because his courtyard could acquire even without his knowledge. Okay, so now we say that the next. All right, we'll stop. We'll just do the next Mishnah. Let's say somebody digs a pit in the private domain. And somebody digs a pit in the private domain, and then the pit opens up into the public domain. Or if he digs it in public, and it opens up into the private domain, or he digs it from his domain and it opens up into somebody else's domain. We're going to say in all these cases, a person is chayav, he's responsible for having dug a pit. Says the Gemara, if somebody digs his pit in his private domain and opens up at the public, he's liable. This is the definition of the Torah, that when the Torah says that you're liable for a pit, it's something you dig in your private and opens up into public. It's a hazard. That's the position of Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Akiva says, Hifkir Rishuso, V'lo Hifkir Voro. Rabbi Akiva says No, what is the definition of a pit in the public domain that the Torah tells us? That's where he made his area, his property around the pit onerous, but he did not make the pit itself onerous. He's still considered to be responsible for it. Zel Bora Morbator. That's the definition of the pit in the Torah, which we're going to discuss, God willing, Bezras Hashem Yisparach, in tomorrow's daf. If anybody has any questions, happy to address.